on behalf of the Miss Earth South Africa, the Presidential Precinct, our YALI members, Togo-san, the Miss Earth South Africa winners and ambassadors, our Kathrada Foundation, our Nelson Mandela Foundation, the US Embassy, and the museum, of course, our Apartheid Museum. On behalf of everybody, it takes so many different stakeholders to make something like this happen. And thank you and welcome to each and every single one of you. As mentioned, a leader that we are very proud of, that has gone overseas and come back home and given of the things that she's learned. Catherine Constantinides embodies what it means to be a real leader. So I'd like you to all shayi zandla, gakulu, clap your hands for Catherine Constantinides.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. I think so much has been said, I don't even need to really do a welcome, but just to say thank you very much for all being here today. A very special and warm welcome to my fellow YALI fellows who are here in the room this morning, and one of them is going to be in the first panel, Bongekile Khadebe, and thank you so much for being here today and also representing the US Embassy. This is a program and an opportunity for us to really harness our leadership skills, and it has been something that has been a very, very important part of my journey. And I was honored to be at the Presidential Precinct along with Lwazi and Sibusiso, who will speak with you a little later. And from the Presidential Precinct, we are very honored to host here in South Africa Mr. Neil Piper. Thank you so much for being here and for being part of making today possible for all of us. It is important for us as young people to also realize that it's not just about the opportunities given to us, but it is what we do with those opportunities that matter. It is what we do with the space and time that we occupy and how we use that to impact change. It's really, really inspiring for us to have the different stakeholders here today, different stakeholders that really do build our society. They are part of the social cohesion project of who we want to be as South Africans, who we want to be as a Southern African region. And I think that Ella mentioned perfectly, each and every one of us plays an important role in building the communities that we come from. And it really is the different spaces that we are in, the different phases that we're in, that we're able to contribute differently. Each and every one of us has a different set of ideals, ideas, values, and it is all of those ingredients that make the magic of who we are. And to our partners for hosting us today as well, again, a huge thank you to the Apartheid Museum and to Togo-san. Thank you so much for allowing this wonderful space for a wonderful and vibrant and most certainly a very layered approach on leadership with a really rich discussion that we are going to have. So welcome to all of you. Thank you for being here. I know that some of you may not have signal in the venue. We did not realize that there won't be signal, but please do make your notes, share some of the sentiments and the great content from today a little bit later. There are specific hashtags that you can use. Those are at the bottom of your program. Earth Leaders SA is the main hashtag we'll be using. Please also feel free to tag us in those posts and we will follow the discussion. And we really want to be able to share the discussion, especially with young people who can't be here today. And to the schools who are here, thank you for coming and representing. We know that this is kind of a pause and a break in your examination timetable, the end of the year, wrapping up your school year for 2018. But we appreciate you being here. And we hope that this is a little bit of energy and inspiration ahead of you going into a new year and many of you going into a new phase of your life and a new chapter. So thank you all so much for being here. To our amazing ambassadors who do phenomenal work in their communities each and every day, thank you so much for being here. And to our Togo-san entrepreneurs who are in the room with us, thank you for being here and sharing in this moment with us.
On that note, I'd like to welcome our panel one. If you could join me up on stage, we are going to be talking about the power of the place, which is the tour that you've just done, and the person speaking on the power of the place is our Deputy Director of the Apartheid Museum, Wadey Davey, who's our Deputy Director. Please join us. Next on the panel, we have Professor Vern Harris, who's the Director of Archive and Dialogue at the Nelson Mandela Foundation. Thank you very much for joining us. And then next on our panel, we have we did have Mr. Nishan Bolton, who was joining us, who is the Executive Director of the Kathrada Foundation, but unfortunately he has been called away and given us a very respectable, very responsible and capable young lady, Busisiwe Nkosi, who is the Anti-Racism Manager for the Kathrada Foundation. As mentioned, our CEO, and this is the message that I need to share with you, because it's not just that he's absconded from his responsibilities, but he has been called away, and he'll be attending the Zondo Commission today in support of Minister Pravin Gordhan. So he is doing his responsibility on that side. Thank you, Busisiwe, for joining our panel. And then next we have Bongikile Radebe from the Mandela Washington Fellowship. She's the coordinator from the Mandela Washington Fellowship from the US Embassy mission to South Africa. So welcome to the panel. Can we give them a round of applause? I'm excited to chat to you, but I really want the young people in the crowd, and by young I'm talking to young and old. It's really young at heart, and I think that's important to share with us what has been your journey. Bongikile, we'll start on this side because you're closer to the microphone. But what has been your journey? How have you found yourself to this position at the US Embassy? What does the US Embassy do in support of the Mandela Washington Fellowship? Share a little bit about your organization with us.
All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting us, and this is such an incredible platform. So I think I'll start from when I was in high school to now, right? That's the main audience. So I grew up wanting to be a chartered accountant, funny enough. I loved numbers. I was really good at maths. And so the natural suggestion is that you'd be a chartered accountant. So got to varsity and I registered for a BCom accounting degree. But I was equally passionate about leadership from a very young age. So when I was their age or at their level, I was president of my high school. So leadership to me has always been very important. And I think being able to impact the space that I'm in is something that has always been with me from a very young age. So I then realized while in varsity that perhaps chartered accountancy isn't really for me, just given my character. And I then decided though to complete my degree in finance. And moving on from varsity, I then worked in banking and wealth and investment management, and then moved on to corporate and investment banking. But I still did a lot of leadership work. So there's a program on SABC One called One Day Leader. So I was on that program as one of the 6 finalists there. And this was while I was completing my final year at the University of Johannesburg. So I was busy with academics, busy with leadership work. And I think that for me was always something that I'm not removed out of. And I think that's what's important is what's your purpose? What do you want to do? What are the issues that you're very passionate about? But being on the other side of solutions and not just being the person that's complaining. And so did that, was very passionate about entrepreneurship as well. So a fun fact is I used to do people's hair when I was in high school, and it would earn me extra money. So I really loved that a lot. But after my experience on One Day Leader and having seen how young women are treated differently from young men who share the very same ambitions, I wanted to do something about that. So I started my own organization called Her Destiny at the time. And I basically used tea to uplift women and bringing different women from different backgrounds, different career journeys, different ages, different social classes, and different races as well. And really building the next generation of leaders. And so being able to do that for women is what actually led me to go to the United States on the Mandela Washington Fellowship program. And for me, that was when I decided to leave the financial services sector and truly focus on doing work that I love, which has always been about impacting people. And so when I went on the Mandela Washington Fellowship program, I went on the business and entrepreneurship track, which really was an opportunity to not only develop myself as a leader, but to meet other wonderful young people, not just from South Africa, but across the continent. And I guess that's also something that's so powerful about a journey, is it's not just about you, but being able to learn from other people as well who are doing work that's very different from you, but share a common goal. And that's always about the empowerment and betterment of people. And while I was on the program, I then served on the board, which allowed me the opportunity to work very closely with the US Embassy and other stakeholders that really worked on the program. And that for me then became a time where I really enjoyed what I did, and no one was paying me to do it. It really was, how do you connect people? So I see myself as a connector. I think I'm able to connect people not just with opportunities, but with other people as well, and seeing their goals to fruition. So that for me greatly inspires me. And this is how I find myself at the US Embassy today. And so I think the journey for me has really been about being true to what I believe is my calling, and it may change, it may evolve with time. In the next 5-10 years, it may still evolve, but being able to open myself up to the opportunities that are presented, and being able to use up opportunities within the lifetime of the opportunity. And so being able to see young people who are in here today, one of the programs that I also look after is not just the Mandela Washington Fellowship program, but there's also a YES program where high school learners get to spend 10 months in the United States, and we select 15 of them across the country. So if you guys are between the ages of 15 and 17, next year definitely apply, because I think for me, someone asked me, so why do you like doing what you do? And being able to connect ordinary young South Africans who are doing extraordinary work with opportunities globally, ensuring that people are globally relevant, globally aware, and are solving at a global level. That for me is what keeps me going on the journey.
Awesome. Lovely. Vern Harris, who is our professor on the panel, please tell us about your journey as to how you became the Director of Archive and Dialogue at the Nelson Mandela Foundation, and a little bit about what the Nelson Mandela Foundation does. Why is it important for young people to know this?
Yeah, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Sanbonani. It's difficult to answer a question like that in a few sentences, but I'll try. So I was running a small freedom of information NGO based at Wits University in the early 2000s. I got a phone call from Nelson Mandela's office in 2001. And the request was to come and help Madiba with record keeping. And over several years, I would give that kind of assistance. And then I was asked in 2004 to come as a permanent resource to the foundation. I worked quite closely with Madiba for about 5 years. You know, he was donating his diaries, his notebooks, personal correspondence, and so on. And we set up an archive, which is now you know, a fully functional resource and at the heart of what the Nelson Mandela Foundation does. Long story about that institution, but let me just say that, you know, for Madiba stepping down, and that's a very good point you made about leaders needing to know when to step back, especially when they get old, and being a Madala myself, this becomes more and more critical. But he, in his retirement, was still deeply concerned about where we are as a country. And I think we could argue that the transformation project, which his generation of leadership introduced in the 90s, has stalled. And it doesn't matter whether you're looking at land, And this is why it is such an important issue right now, is that we simply have to redistribute wealth. And we have to disturb fundamentally those patterns of privilege and power which were created over centuries. So the challenge for leadership in our country today is not only to fix broken institutions and to clean up the mess, but it's also to fundamentally transform our society. And the Nelson Mandela Foundation was mandated by Madiba to contribute to that transformation work through what is called dialogue and memory. And it's, you know, this is a memory institution here, but the kind of memory work Madiba wanted us to be doing is the difficult work. The difficult work like the activists who disappeared during the apartheid years and whose remains have never been found. The individuals like the security policeman who was involved in the murder of Ahmed Timor is being held accountable, but also disclosing. People need the truth about what happened. And some of those truths are difficult truths. It's not only about an oppressive regime, it's also about betrayals. It's about internal fighting, very often, that we don't want to talk about. And the dialogue work is about ensuring that the solutions that we need to find, the sustainable solutions, and I've mentioned land, but if we look at our very young people, younger than you, 6 years old, how is it possible that 1 in 4 6-year-olds is stunted? In other words, is suffering from inadequate nutrition. We've got to change that. So early childhood development is one of our focus areas. So the memory and the dialogue go together. These solutions will emerge through sometimes difficult conversations, through negotiations, through mediations. And we look to make a contribution to that and to continue Madiba's legacy, not in a feel-good way, with these big triumphalist memory projects, but to do the hard work very often behind closed doors.
Awesome, thank you. I think maybe let's keep the microphone that side. I'm sure you guys can all hear me, right?
Sure.
I can project. Okay. Okay. I thought they could hear me in Mongolia. Clearly not. Thank you on that. And it is so important that we recognize, to be a leader, there are hard jobs that you need to be done, difficult things. And we often just assume that the leaders are living the life, because it's all glitz and glamour, but there's a lot of hard work that goes on behind doors. And that is really important to maintain that. As you mentioned, upholding and the memory of is important. And maybe Wayde, you as the Deputy Director of the museum is able to share with us the objective of holding on to certain elements of our past. Why is that so important? Tell us a little bit about your journey. How did you come to be the Deputy Director? And a little bit about the Apartheid Museum, please.
Thank you. I have had a passion for the arts for all my life. So as a young girl, when I just started working, I managed to squirm my way into the Market Theatre as an usher. And so I worked there at night for 2 years. And there was one play that was on at the time called Die van Aarders van Grootoord by Pieter Dirk Uys. It played for 2 years. I sat and watched it every night for 2 years. It was just the most amazing and the most, I think, a play that prophesied our future, if you look at what's happening today. But that was my passion. It's always been my passion. I did venture out into the NGO sector. I worked for the Institute of Race Relations for 4 years. I worked for the Child Welfare Society for, I think that was my second job. I'm very old, so there's lots of things. And then at one point, I went into the corporate sector and I hated it. I then went into I started to work for the director of culture, who was the director of this museum. He was the city of Johannesburg's director of culture. I worked for him as his PA. And later on, I became the principal cultural officer under his directorship. Part of our portfolio was museums. My only experience at that time with museums was a school visit when I was a young girl, and my memory of it might be flawed, but it's my memory of a dingy place that was scary, where you couldn't even look at stuff, never mind touch it, and you had this curator standing there and watching your every move. And I think that was my only memory of a museum, so I wasn't very interested in museums. And then when we had 3 museums under our portfolio, I had to be interested in museums. And it then made me realize the importance of what museums are for, why are they established, why is it important to keep memories. And then we moved over and we worked at the Apartheid Museum. And of course, I thought I was an activist in my days, drinking wine, talking politics, but I wasn't. When I came here, I learned what our history was about. And I think that's the important part, is when you know where we come from, what our parents went through, what our peers, my peers went through, you then realize the importance of knowing your history. And I think this is what this museum is trying to portray, is to say that South Africa does not have an ordinary history. It's like a few other countries, we have an extraordinary history. And if we don't know that history, we are bound to repeat the same mistakes of the past. And this is the importance of this museum. We continually add to the museum. We've just recently, curator sitting over there, Emilia, we've just recently added some artworks as another layer to the museum. And at the end of the museum, we're also putting in contemporary artwork that speaks to the ills of today, the society of today, what is happening in our society, and how do we deal with it. So the importance, I think, for young people, teachers are used in the museum as a resource and to help them to teach the apartheid story, which is not an easy story to tell. And the learners are seeing what we as parents are saying, you know, we weren't allowed to go into this place and that place. And they can't understand how it worked. How did you know you're not allowed to go in? Well, this museum shows you how. This museum shows you how people like Steve Biko, Neil Agate, etc., died for the struggle. And then just... and so it's an important place to visit. It's an important memory to keep, but it's not something to carry on your shoulders. It's lessons to learn from our past. I was just going to say something else now, and it's out of my head. Okay, well, anyway, that's my story. So I hope that from this session that we will all learn from each other. And I was very happy to hear what you said about knowing when to lead and knowing when to follow. I think that's really important. And I think if you listen to my story, mine is about a passion that leads you down a certain path and eventually brings you to where you need to be. It's not just about an opportunity that was there and you grabbed it. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. You know what I want to highlight from just these 3 speakers is that they didn't just start at the museum. They didn't just start at the US Embassy. There were so many things that they were working. They were hustling. These are your hustlers, because they were involved in so many different elements. And then opportunities came their way. And it's really important for you to realize and understand that you are doing what it is that you're doing in your own space. Things will come to you, but you've got to also look up and look ahead. Because when you're working and you're looking down, you may miss things. So look up and see what are the opportunities around you. Who are the people that you can connect with? As Bongekile mentioned, you know, it's not just about connecting resources, it's opportunities, it's people. There's so many bundles of opportunities around you here in just this room. Connect with one another. It then brings me to Busisiwe Nkosi. Tell us a little bit about your journey of being part of the Kathrada Foundation. You lead up the anti-racism department, as it were. Tell us a little bit about that, and that must also be a very hard story to tell, but it's one that we have to keep telling so that not to repeat the mistakes of the past. Share with us a little bit about your personal journey and then, of course, the organization of the Kathrada Foundation.
Good morning. Oh, hi. Okay, so I'll share my journey. I think with me, I can't speak about me without speaking about the foundation. And the reason being is that I actually joined the foundation at the age of 20. And I'm now going to 30. Okay, next year I'll be 30. So I've basically grown up at the foundation. So starting off at the foundation as a volunteer. But I have to say, for me, I've never seen myself as an activist until I got to the foundation. I was more sports. I was more the loudmouth, but sports was my thing. So on a weekend, I'm at Wits playing volleyball, and that was my passion. And I had never thought about politics. I didn't care about politics. I had never really also thought about the issues of race and how it actually affects us in our own country. So I think for me, going to the foundation and volunteering was the eye-opener there. And for me, it was starting off as a volunteer, and then starting off a youth department for the foundation. And that has gone on, and now we've since I've grown up now, we now have a few other people running it, like Dawood, who's here today. And Dawood is here, so if people want to speak to Dawood about the youth programs, he's right there. And with the youth program, it's been youth leadership programs, where we've been working with young people on a yearly basis, which has now changed though. Because the question was, if you work with 100 young people over a 12-month period, how effective is it? Not very much effective, right? So we've now changed our model to clubs or youth clubs in communities, and we've started off in the south of Joburg and hoping to expand over the years. And we're hoping that by the time we reach Kathrada's centenary, we would have at least 100 youth clubs in South Africa. So, but now moving away from that, and because I've grown, it was then, what is it that I can do as Busi? Is the youth work still there in me? Yes, I still have a bit of passion for it, but I can offer so much more. And I think as challenging as this position is that I'm in, I feel that I give much more, because I think the issues of race and racism and understanding the inequalities that exist in South Africa is something we need to be open about. We try and sweep things under the carpet, but when you see it happening, what do you then do? Do you keep quiet because it's not happening to you? Or do you make a noise because the other person is voiceless? I think so getting that and drilling that into people's minds has just been a lovely thing for me. And I think my highlight, though, I have to say, is a race reporting app that we've developed and that we hope to launch next year. So on your phones, you will have this app, so when you come across racism incidences, when you are affected even, or the next person, you can report these race-related incidences, and we as a foundation will see how we try and deal with it, or also push you in the right direction if it's a case where we don't have the capacity to help. So I'm in my element. It's like gaming on the one side. But I also think growing up at the foundation has also exposed me to a lot of people. So our stalwarts. At first I tried living up to Kathrada and the others, then I realized I just can't, There's just some things that they did that I wouldn't do. There's just some sacrifices that they sacrificed, which I would not sacrifice. I'm sorry. I'm being honest here. I know saint either. and they also used to say, I know Madiba used to say that he's not a saint. And for me, it's looking at the stalwarts and looking at the mistakes that they made also, and how we as the younger generation don't repeat those mistakes. So for me, it's been more of a journey of self-discovery, I would say, that has led me to where I am today. Yeah.
Fantastic. You can just feel the passion. And I think that's fantastic. I'm excited for the app as well. It's a different kind of sports game, that. And that's fantastic because that's using technology and bringing it to a whole nother level. And that's very exciting. And please, how do we as Generation Earth, I know there's 3 different schools here that are part of Generation Earth, Young Leaders for the Environment. We need to now connect them and you to reach that 100 school, not the limit, but I mean, because we're going to expand. But how do we connect that? So there's an opportunity for our Generation Earth. I'm trying to look for Mr. Joseph Magumbata. Ah, there you are, sir. And I see our other 2 teachers. Fantastic. Hasina, please wave for us. Rahim. And then Miss Florence Magwaza, wave for us so we can see you. Perfect. Now, you saw all the teachers, hey? We've got to connect that. Just to round up in our closing remarks for this panel, please tell us, what does leadership mean to each one of you?
Sure, that's always such a loaded question. You know, I think for me, I've moved from commending people for doing good. Oftentimes people do good and we're like, that's a leader. Throughout my work and observing even other people's work, for me, leadership is the ability to be interested in issues that you aren't interested in as well, but being able to work in that space for the betterment of other people. And I would say that for me is a leader. It's someone who shows up when it's good and when it's bad. It's someone who shows up whether they agree or not. It's someone who shows up whether they benefit or not. So being able to be interested in things that don't necessarily interest you directly, but work towards the betterment of others.
I think for me, three elements are most important in defining leadership. The first one would be taking responsibility for one's own liberation. You know, an army can liberate a country, but only you can liberate yourself. And a leader does that work and never stops doing that work. Second element for me is taking responsibility for others' liberation. And that's your point about working for the broader society. But the third one, I think, is nurturing the leadership to come. And my argument is that a good leader, when she or he steps down, you don't really notice because the succession is so robust. And one mark of a good leader is that the successor, those who come after, are as good as that person.
Well, I think both panelists have basically said what I would have said. Perhaps I'd just add that for me, a leader is one who has a shared vision with the people with whom he or she is involved. And that the empowerment of people around you is so important that, like Vern said, you could actually not be around and everything will still carry on as it should. Another quality, I think, for a leader is to have a vision that is up to date with what is happening in the future. And I particularly want to speak about that part because of young people being here. The world of work is changing. It's changing dramatically. It's changing fast. There is no longer 9-to-5 jobs, and it's going to be a bigger hustle. You're going to have to compete and fight for everything you want. So if you're passionate, you're going to be able to do it, and you can lead others in that way as well.
Everyone has said everything, I guess, also. But I think for me, it's also a leader is one who possesses some integrity, honesty, but also one who is able to admit to making mistakes and a person who's willing for others to correct the mistakes that they make, but also be able to let other people or bring out the leadership potential of others around them.
Perfect, thank you. Words of wisdom, which is wonderful from this panel of leaders. Please give a round of applause to our panel one. Thank you so much for being here with us.